to BlackUSA.news morning show. I'm your host, William Honolulu Jr. Join us as we explore the news and opinions that impact our community. We break down how the major stories have a very personal, local, and racial impact. No topic is off limits, but even if the conversation gets rough, we're always going to keep it real. Greetings and salutations, all my friends out there in internet land. I am William Honolulu Jr., and I have the privilege of serving as the host of the Black USA News Morning Show. Welcome, 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 welcome. Before we get started with anything else, I just want to say thank you to you. You have a lot of other options of places that you can go to get your information and stuff like that, and you chose to spend a little bit of time with us. So thank you. We have a really great show planned for you guys today. We're going to be talking to Dr. Michelle Talbert-Horsey, very frequent guest, a friend of the show. We're going to talk about what employers can do to start working with students or to prepare themselves to be working with either people who are currently in school or those who are recent grads or whatever. Because there's some cultural alignments and some things that we found that some employers just don't understand that may make working with students a little bit easier to for everybody involved, I guess. Yeah, a little bit easier for both sides. But before we get into that, y'all know I got to take care of some business first. First thing we do is we're going to talk about Breadcoin. I love the fact that we get to talk about Breadcoin. Breadcoin is an amazing organization that uses donations to help people pay for food that they need. So what happens is they take the donations and they put the donations to this bread coin. You can see right here is what the bread coin looks like. So each one of those bread coins right now is worth $2.50. And so if somebody who receives this bread coin through a network of community advocates and providers, they can go to these restaurants and pay for their meal using bread coin. They can maintain their dignity, they can and still have their needs met, and that's a wonderful thing. A lot of times in our society we require people to look a certain way or to be homeless enough so that we can feel that our investment in their well-being is worth it. But the reality is that these are people, and I'm grateful that we get an opportunity to work with an organization that remembers to treat people like people. Black USA News is still managing its ongoing coverage of the Maryland 2020 election cycle. We get an opportunity to vote for elected officials in November. The primary has already concluded in Maryland last July, and now we're getting close to the point where we have to choose our elected officials. We've pulled together a lot of information, not just from our hosts and commentators, but we've also pulled a lot of the interviews that we've had with candidates and we've put them into one place for you so that you can find out what these candidates are about. Tell you a little bit about my company, the Grinding Gang. We are an organization that really helps entrepreneurs in the for-profit area and nonprofit area figure out how to make sense of all of the information. Sometimes running a business can be incredibly overwhelming because every article you read says something different than another article. Every piece of advice doesn't sound like it aligns with what you're doing. What we do is we help you figure out your why. I'm going to borrow that from Dr. Talbert-Horsey. She loves to talk about helping students find their why in employment. We do kind of the same thing for entrepreneurs. We help you figure out how to assess which piece of information you have and how it fits in your business development. We have free membership. You get access to the knowledge library, some business documents, like some examples of grants and business plans and things like that. And we have monthly events that you're also invited and welcome to attend for free. So take an opportunity to check us out at www.grindinggang.com. All right. Okay. I think that's all of my show notes. That's everything I'm supposed to be talking about. Let me make sure, because, once we get into the conversation with the doc, it takes on a life of its own. So, okay. Are we ready? I think I got all my show notes out the way. Oh, there it is. Hello, Dr. Talbert-Horsey. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me back to talk
Oh,
about employers and their engagement with students. I think it's going to be a good time.
oh, it always is when we get an opportunity to talk to you. So for those who have missed some of your previous appearances on the show, tell them a little bit about yourself. Oh, actually, you got some new news or some changes that have happened since the last time you've been on our show, right?
Yes. So the last time I was on your show, I was the Director of Career Development Services at Harrisburg Area Community College. I
Hmm.
am now the Director of Career Connections for the Community College of Philadelphia. And
Oh,
I've
you know,
been in
Philly
the
is one of
higher
my
ed,
favorite cities.
but I've been in the higher ed game for about 23 years.
Hmm.
As an academic advisor, as an academic crisis intervention counselor, as a career counselor. I am a licensed counselor for the state of Pennsylvania, as well as being a nationally certified counselor. And
Mm.
now I am working on my certification to be a certified salary negotiator.
Ooh, wait! I didn't even know about that. Tell me about. I've never heard of a certified salary negotiator. What is that about?
Well, it gets into the nitty gritty of how to negotiate salary, when to negotiate salary,
Hmm.
understanding your leverage and how to
Hmm.
use leverage in salary negotiations. It addresses how to address the salary question during interviews
Mm.
and on online applications.
Wow. So like, is all the details and best practices and data and all that other stuff?
All the good stuff.
Oh, what's your bad? So you about to help? I'll be out here helping people get all the money. Okay. All right. So one of the reasons I love it when you show up is, aside from the fact that it just confirms to everybody that I know dope people, because I know you and you dope. It also has been really enlightening to in some of the conversations we've had about students preparing themselves for the world of work, how they can take advantage of some of the resources that are available on various campuses, internships, and all the like. I really appreciate the fact that today we're going to turn that around. We're going to talk about how employers can work on preparing their businesses to work with students, either those who are currently students or those who are recent grads. So, in your experience, like what has been some of the biggest challenges when employers are bringing on students? Uh, like, is it the intergenerational thing? Is it the lack of understanding of work? Is it the lack of understanding of it? What is it?
Well, I think what's going on, what we're seeing now, there's a big shift that's happening.
Hmm.
And that is, I think it's generational, but I think it's a good thing. I think what we're seeing with our Gen Zers, especially,
Hmm.
is they are changing even the term professional. They are changing what that term actually means.
Hmm.
And they're challenging what it means to go to work. Do you have to be at a desk 9 to 5? Or, and COVID taught us this, you can be remote and still get your job done.
Yeah.
So they're changing and requiring companies and businesses to be flexible in terms of and really live up to this whole idea of work life balance. And so even when we talk about looking at a salary, let's say, if someone is applying for a job and they're at the point where they're trying to negotiate their salary or really they're negotiating their compensation package,
Hmm.
asking to be remote 1 day a week can be a part of your package. They may not be able to give you more money, but they
Hmm.
may be able to say, okay, we can be flexible with your schedule. Or you can work a flex schedule of some sort. Like
Hmm.
come in late and leave later, or come in at 9, leave at 6, or something like that. Those things are things that employers now have to really consider. I will even go a step further and say dress. What is considered
Okay.
professional dress is now being questioned.
And how is that? You know, I'm gonna circle back around to the to this wholeness and the work life balance that employees are starting to demand in the marketplace. But talk a little bit more about the dress thing, because we've done some shows where we talk about whether it's about specifically about Black women, or we talk about natural hair in general. We addressed a lot of the lack of diversity or the lack of inclusion in some of the dress codes in a lot of corporate offices, especially going back in the past. You know, the whole idea of the IBM. If you want to work at a company like IBM with those salaries, you had to all like everybody bought their suits at the same place. Everybody drove the same kind of car. Whereas as we start dealing with a lot more diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really not just as buzzwords, but really in practice, that clothing issue comes up often. So can you talk a little bit about that in particular before we jump into some of the more mental health aspects of employment?
Well, I think with clothing, one of the things that people have brought up in terms of conversation is that this whole idea of professional is Eurocentric.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not very inclusive of other cultures that may not consider a suit and tie. They may not consider a suit and tie to be professional. Maybe it's something else.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think of women that wear a hijab. Some people may not consider that professional, but it goes along with a religious practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I heard some terms today. Um, I'm a member of an organization called NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and there was an employer on
Mm-hmm.
there that had a question about job fairs. And the
Mm-hmm.
question was, is your job fair going to be campus casual, business casual, or business professional? That says a
Mm-hmm.
lot. A couple years ago, that would not have been a question.
Mm-hmm.
The answer
Mm-hmm.
would have been automatically business professional, suit, tie,
Yep.
if you're a man, dress or pantsuit if you are a woman. The hair issue with African American women, I think, is very different in the sense that you're talking about, in many cases, someone's identity, how they identify when you're looking at their hair. I used to wear my hair in a natural state. And one of the things I was concerned about was, how are people going to view me? Are they going to view me as being radical? Are they
Mm-hmm.
going to view me as being unprofessional? But
Mm-hmm.
I decided for myself, it didn't matter what other people thought because I knew my own worth. And
Mm-hmm.
my feeling was, if you're going to look at my hair and make a negative judgment about me, then do
Mm-hmm.
I really want to work for your company?
And I think that brings kind of circles it back to this whole idea of that with employers now, one of the things that you have to be aware of is that people want to show up as their whole selves. Like they don't want to, mm, recognizing that there is a level of social interaction where you have to wear these masks, but they want to be as authentically themselves as they can, which means that they're bringing many of their values to the table. So, for example, there are some employers, and actually it goes both ways because you have some employers who time isn't that big a deal. You know, because I remember being trained in professionalism, the Eurocentric version that you're talking about, and in the Eurocentric version, time is everything. You have to get as much stuff done in as much time as possible. You have to move, move, move. Relationships are transactional, that kind of thing. And as I started, especially as I started going through my process of really understanding that the Eurocentric culture that I had been trained in wasn't even one that fit me, my personality, let alone like me culturally, and started identifying other things, I realized that, to your point before, like there are places that don't fit me, and really taking a step back and asking myself, what does that look like? Why am I wanting to work in these places? And conversely, is true because you have some employers for whom they don't think time is that big a deal. They much rather deal with the relationship and the well-being of everybody in the space. And those two versions of how to work together can become very conflicting. If, you know, even as an employee, if I'm really time conscious and my boss is kind of laissez-faire with time, that'll make our interactions more difficult and vice versa. So as the employers are thinking about um, bringing on employees, and I want to, if we could just limit this to like small businesses, under 50 employees, not any of the large corporations, because that's a totally different process. But as some of these smaller businesses are going to start onboarding students, what do they need to know about their own culture so that they are bringing in students, or how they need to adjust their culture so that they can recruit this kind of students that will thrive in their environment, and it'll be a win-win for everybody. Again, I'm getting older, so I'm a little rambly, a little more rambly than I was. I hope you understood where I was going with that.
Well, I think that they have to check their biases,
Mm-hmm.
their unconscious bias. Why wouldn't I hire this person?
Mm-hmm.
What is it about this candidate that I really like versus what I don't like? And really delve into the experience that the person has, and what they think the person can bring. Because experience, I will say this, and I never say this in any of our other talks, but experience is only one small piece of the pie. Your resume is one small piece of the pie. The other part is what they think you'll be able to do based upon what you've done in the past. But they have to really check their biases that they're aware of and dig deep for the unconscious bias. Because the issue with hair that
Mm-hmm.
makes it such a challenge is, even though we have the Crown Act,
Mm-hmm.
no one's going to, it's like ageism. No one's going to come out and tell you we're not hiring you because you're X, Y, and Z age. No one's going to come out and say we're not hiring you because your hair is in braids or you have an afro. No one's going to come out and say that. So that's what makes it such a challenge for women to make that decision. And that's why I think for many women and men,
Mm-hmm.
they really have to check the culture of the company. Now, how do you do that? One way of doing that is through networking
Mm-hmm.
and meeting people who actually work for that company. That helps you to figure out if that's even a place you want to even apply.
Right.
So you need to start networking and talking to people, going to events where the company is going to be speaking, and
Mm-hmm.
see if you can interact with the speakers after the event and asking questions. What is the culture like at your company?
Mm-hmm.
How does
Now,
someone become successful in your company?
here's one of the challenges, though, is that a lot of the students, um, how do employers create answers to those questions that actually make sense to students? Because one of the challenges that I have seen myself, hell, I've had, is the incongruence between what I think should happen, or how I think things should be based on looking from the outside in, the research that I do on the company and what I think the priorities are, and then some of the cultural things that I find once I start there. Sometimes it's not so divergent. It's a little like, oh, I didn't expect this, but here we go. But for some, it is like, well, those words don't mean this. Oh, yes, it does. No, 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 no. And so how is it that we can get employers to be in a better position to, again, to really be able to, I'm sorry, you mentioned the unconscious bias piece. So beyond that, how do they come up with, say, some objective criteria to address some of those unconscious biases, and ensure that they are communicating with, they understand that they're communicating with people who may not have the same frames of reference? I'm
Well,
sorry, I get so excited when I talk to you, Doc. I'm like, wow, I just talked so many questions I want to ask.
well, one way to begin addressing that is to do climate surveys
Hmm.
of your company. What is it really like working here? And have it be anonymous, obviously.
Okay.
Um, I'm not suggesting that they go out and hire a DEI consultant or anything like that. I'm not suggesting that. I mean, if you want to, feel free, but I'm not suggesting that. But
Hmm.
it's something that your HR department should be able to handle. Is
Wait. Let's talk about some of the real things about employers. A lot of times, the HR department is the secretary that started on with me and is really good with people, and so that's our new HR. That's our HR lady,
okay.
Kathy.
Then that's okay. That's a whole other show because that's a problem.
Okay. Okay. So, but honestly, that's one of the things that I want to talk about is that a lot of times the employers think that the issue is that the students aren't ready for real work, but sometimes it is the world that we have prepared the students for isn't the real business you have. And so that's why I want to talk a lot more about, like, okay, how do they get their minds right? Do you think that if a business brought some interns on for a little while, that might help them with the acculturalization
I
of students?
think definitely having interns because interns typically don't hold back and they will let you know if they've had a good experience or a bad experience or what they would change or what they would change and what they wouldn't change. But I would even change the language.
Mm,
And I wouldn't necessarily, if I were a company and I was um, presenting to a group of students, maybe I'm presenting an internship opportunity and I'm talking about my company, I
mhm.
wouldn't talk about, we're doing a study on unconscious bias. Huh? To how
Okay.
many 16 and 17-year-olds is that going to make sense? Nobody, that
How
doesn't
many
make sense.
40-year-olds do you think that's going to make sense to? They'll just use context clues and make it up themselves.
You have to use different language. This is how we grow our people. This is how you can use something simple when you're dealing with high school students. This is how we treat our employees.
Mhm.
Something really simple. They get that. Either you treat them well or you don't. Or depending upon what you say, that student is either going to think, oh, you treat them very well or you don't treat them well.
Gotcha. So, so let's look at this as far as the treatment of students goes. I love the idea about the getting the honest feedback, but I do really want us to focus in on some of the challenges of some of these small businesses because and a lot of them, their margins are paper thin. They in many of them, the leader or the CEO or whatever role that title is, they are not necessarily making even market rate for their role. And so there's a lot of, in many of these businesses, there's a lot of pressure for performance. And what that means is that they have not necessarily thought through how to onboard people. So, how important are systems in the design and the development of that engagement in bringing students on or recent grads on as employees?
Well, when you're thinking about the onboarding as a process,
Hmm.
and it's not just filling out paperwork and having people fill out their W-4 forms. I can tell you when I started at Hack, I did have to fill out, I did the forms and all of that stuff. But my supervisor was so great. He had a schedule for me.
Hmm.
He went through he on the first day he went through the schedule. He
Hmm.
explained what he wanted me to do. He explained the metrics in terms of what
Hmm.
he wanted me to do the first week, what he wanted me to accomplish. If I had questions, I could ask him questions, but I didn't really have any questions. It was pretty
Hmm.
straightforward.
Hmm.
Um, he told me who the players were, who I would need to contact that week. He
Wow.
told me how to contact them. He didn't tell me what to say, but he said, okay,
Mhm.
well, this is what I need you to do this week. And I'll tell you, he did one thing that I would encourage any company to do, but I doubt many would do this.
Hmm.
He said, he gave me a list. He said, I want you to, over the course of this week, tell me what your goals are. Tell me what your next step is beyond this position. Because
Wow.
I want to be in a position to be able to help you get that next role. And I want to be able to
Wow.
put things in front of you and have you take advantage of different meetings and different things, groups, like groups on campus and
Hmm.
different committees. He said, I want to make sure that I put you in front of people that can help you move the needle.
That is amazing.
And that was my onboarding experience.
And I think that serves as a really great example for a lot of business owners when it comes to really thinking through bringing actually not just students but anybody else on. What he did, he didn't look at you as part of the transaction. I talk about pimping in the corporate world and how we a lot of times employers look at employees as hoes, like you, the computer, you or a chair have all the same kind of role and care. But it sounds like what he recognized was that the job was part of your career pathway, and he wanted to invest and make that pathway as fruitful as possible. And for me, that sounds like a really good way of getting that mutual buy-in. You know, because I imagine that it was well. Actually, you know what? Let me not imagine. Tell me about how did that's the onboarding experience. How did he maintain that as you were working there and during your
Yeah, I
transition?
mean, he held true to his word. He put me on different committees. And because of that, I was able to mirror the similar things with my team. And a team of
Mm.
I oversaw a team of 10 people, four
Hmm.
people directly. So with the four folks that I work with directly, I had very similar conversations with them.
Hmm. Hmm.
I know this is one step on your journey. Tell me how I can help you get to the next step. But we also need to do that with our interns as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
especially with our interns, because we know for many of our interns, the internship position is an experiential learning opportunity. Chances are, for some of our interns, they will be hired by the company
Hmm.
full time after they graduate. But
Right.
there are many that are not hired, and it's not because they did bad work. It's because the company just not in a position to hire full time workers.
Right.
But making that investment in an intern
Hmm.
is worth it. And it's more than just, I mean, you're helping them to carve out their path. And that's it. That what you do says a lot about your culture
Yeah.
more than what you say you're doing, is what
Hmm.
you're actually doing.
That is a really great point. I remember, well, I appreciate you talking about how modeling that type of behavior really led you to duplicate that behavior, and I'm hopeful that it for your force direct reports, their subordinates, they were able to get that type of behavior as well. But it strikes me that that comes from a not a mindset of lack or coming to the mindset of finite resources, where when you look at employees, especially students, as commodities for you to get the most value out of, as opposed to humans that you are partnering with, it has been my experience that in many cases that gets more productivity, that gets more investment, as opposed to just trying to make sure that the relationship is transactional. Has that been your experience as well?
It has been my experience. I mean, you want to pour into people.
Hmm.
Um, but then again, as I said before, I'm a counselor, so I'm all about the touchy feely
Right,
stuff.
right, right.
It's considered touchy feely. But yeah, you want to pour into people because
Hmm.
you're really going to get more productivity out of them if they feel like they're getting something too.
Hmm.
And they're getting more than just credit for a class or a paycheck. I mean,
Hmm.
they really feel like they have mentors.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's what you want. You want to create that type of relationship because these are the students that can come back to you years later. Maybe they become professors and they send their students to your company.
Oh,
Or maybe they work with another company that they can partner with you and collaborate with you because they had such a wonderful experience. So, yeah, but I would say that my boss is a perfect example of servant leadership.
hmm.
Perfect example of servant leadership.
Now, one of the things that I will caution some of the people out there, We're talking about best practices and things that you can and we recommend you doing. But let me be clear, I recommend you doing them, at least from my point. I'll let the doc speak for herself. I recommend you doing them if this is really who you are. If you really genuinely care about your employees, make sure that they know that and make sure that it's reciprocated, but also recognize that this is a commercial relationship as well. um, please don't be one of these businesses that try to trade on feel goods and to keep from paying people what they deserve. Especially I find that happens disproportionately to students, because they write off the fact, oh, you don't have experience, but they also are trying to get experience and they're learning. And part of your cost, and the funny part is that one of the reasons that the cost for new employees or for employees with limited experience, one of the reasons that their costs were so much was because back in the day when people treated people like people, so the money that was saved in the wage was put toward training so that they could develop greater skills and things like that and achieve higher wages. But now it is just an excuse to put more money into the profit centers without making the commensurate investment in resources, including people. So I don't know if you have a different position on that, Doc, but I just
You
felt
know,
the need to say that.
I would say that I think it's real. I know that there are places that have unpaid internships. My feeling on this is that you should pay your interns. Many of these students are already working 2, 3 part-time jobs to get through school.
Hmm.
And so for them to take on your internship, that means they have to drop one of those jobs.
Yep.
That affects their rent, that
Yep.
affects their ability to be able to eat, childcare, transportation costs. So even though no one is saying you have to pay $50 an hour,
Right.
but pay at least a living wage, $15 an hour, something. Pay
Right.
them something for their time, especially if you have them there over the summer and they're working basically full time for
Yeah.
you over the summer. If they're working full time, you need to pay them. Even if they're not working full time, you have to consider what they're going through in order to participate in your internship.
And let me say this to the business owners. You need to make sure that one of the reasons to pay them is that you need to make sure that you build in those costs into actual production. Because if you are getting free labor from them and you're not paying them commensurately, either that means that you are just keeping that money in your profit margin, or it means that you are not charging as much as you need to, which means that you are subsidizing your marketing expense on the backs of these students. And again, I want to make sure that we think about it in these terms, because for a lot of students, the value that they receive from internships, especially when you don't have your program structured, is very little. They get to learn how, like for me, one of my internships, the most exciting thing I did was I sent a 13-page fax to South Korea. That was the first international fax I had sent, and that was the highlight. And I was working in an executive level government office, and I asked my intern coordinator to move me to the public defender's office in the juvenile division, because I wanted to learn something. I wasn't just trying to sit back and get an easy A, especially when I was commuting. I was doing all these things because I believed that it would help and benefit my career. But guess what would have also benefited my life and maybe gave me more time to focus on that? A paycheck would have, because I wouldn't have had to leave early, or you pay. I work for you for free, so at 3 o'clock or whatever, I gotta go because the people who pay me, I need to get across town to get there. And so, to Dr. Talbert-Horsey's point, making sure that we spend some time and thinking about the implications, not just on an altruistic thing, but making sure that we build the cost of labor into our business plans, into our financial projections, so that we can charge our clients what they should be charged and not take advantage of people who are in less powerful positions so that we can uh, we can have more. Right?
And to your point, William, if really what you want is a volunteer, then you need to set it up as a volunteer position and
Woo!
call it an internship.
Oh, you know what? You know what? We gonna have to give you an opportunity. You know what? I'm gonna give you the full screen to explain to these Bamas the difference between being a volunteer and an intern. Because I think what you realize, and just hearing you say that, I realize that a lot of people don't know the difference. Go ahead, tell them. Enlighten the folk.
Well, an internship is an experiential learning opportunity, as an opportunity for a student to utilize what they've learned in the classroom on the job, specifically in a job setting or career setting that's reflective of the kind of job that they want to have once they graduate. And it's typically paid or unpaid, but as Will and I have talked about here today, we encourage it to be paid. Sometimes students are in positions where they can get credit for their internship. So that's also a possibility to make it into a credit based internship so that students are getting something for their time. A volunteer position doesn't necessarily have to be career related. You can volunteer any place just to gain some skills, and volunteer positions are not paid. They are by nature, someone is giving freely of their time. But keep in mind, with a volunteer position, you can't ask someone to work 40 hours a week in a volunteer position. It's 2 hours a week, maybe max, maybe 10 hours a week, 2 hours a day. And that's even saying it, that's even a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But with an internship, it's very structured. The outcomes are structured. The objectives and the goals are structured.
Should
There
be.
is outcomes of what you want this person to have experience and be able to do once they finish their internship. In a volunteer experience, there isn't necessarily an outcome per se.
Okay.
So, but you have to determine whether or not you want an internship or you want a volunteer type situation. Now, some students will volunteer just to get some basic skills, which is fine. That's fine. You can still put volunteerism on your resume. It's a great thing to volunteer. I would also offer to the businesses out there, if you're not interested in setting up a volunteer situation, you're not interested in setting up an internship or a co-op situation, but you still want to be involved with students, there are other types of experiential learning opportunities, like, for example, being open to informational interviews.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, that's when someone interviews you and talks to you about what you do, about your job. What do you do? How do you do it? Do you like it? Do you don't like it? What skills do I need to be able to move into X position? Those types of questions. You can open yourself up to those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not interested in doing that, consider being a mentor. A lot of schools have mentor programs. Consider being a mentor, going through the Alumni Association of the college that you graduated from, and
Mm-hmm.
volunteer to be a mentor. That's
Okay.
another way of helping students if you really want to help them
Mm-hmm.
and your business can't support some of the internship or the volunteer. There's lots of other ways you can volunteer. For example, you can volunteer to be on a career panel.
Mm-hmm.
You can volunteer to have someone come to your job and do a job shadow where they just basically follow you around all day and watch what you do. So there's lots of other opportunities that you can explore if you want to get involved with students and you really want to help students.
I think that is a wonderful idea around the volunteerism. And really, before you, I know a lot of small business owners don't have this luxury, but before you bring someone on, do some time, spend some time volunteering on their campus or on campuses like theirs because what you realize when you spend time with people is that you get to know them better or understand some of the cultural nuances and differences, and so that you are better prepared to bring them on to your organization or even understand what their values are as customers. Now, Doc, another piece of this that I think comes up often. It is the enforcing boundaries, and so I recognize that for many of the students, we teach them to enforce their boundaries or what boundaries of work are. Like, 9 to 5. I'm done at 5. And from the older Eurocentric model, it is, well, the more you give the employer for free, the more they're going to keep you on board. And that's no longer a viable model, as you mentioned earlier in the show. So as employers are thinking just about that aspect of how do we discuss setting up boundaries and what those look like here, especially with a lot of the confusion from employees, employers, whether they're students or not, around like breaks and salary versus hourly and stuff like that.
I remember, I don't know if they still do this. Um, my spouse was interested in being a consultant at one point, and his institution had these books, not books, but booklets, I guess, and they were um, like descriptions of the company, and
Mm-hmm.
there were descriptions of the company, uh, and it was a lot about company culture. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forget, in the booklet they said for this one company, it's one of the top consulting companies at the time. I mean, and when I say top, they were paying starting at 100 grand. That was entry level.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
And keep in mind this was maybe 10, 15 years ago. So I don't even think the company is around anymore. It's been absorbed by another company.
Yeah, that merger was big.
But at any rate, in this booklet, they said if you want to spend time and play baseball with your kid on Saturdays and Sundays, this is not the job for you. I, I was a little put off. I was like, oh my gosh. And they had a bunch of things in there. And what they were really telling people was that when we have a client, the expectation is that you're going to stop what you're doing and service that client.
Right.
So they are already telling you what the boundaries are, which makes me there aren't any boundaries when it comes to
Yeah.
this job.
Yeah.
You know, your family life is second to this job. And it was all to prepare the person not for an interview, but a realistic look at what this is going to look like for you.
Right.
That's why I really push for students, and I push this for employers as well, to get in front of students as much as they can and really share and be transparent
Mm-hmm.
about what their culture is. And even the culture, but even the culture of the field, because it may not necessarily be your company, but it's just your field of, let's say, computer science. Let's say
Right.
it's IT. You know, it's just the IT field is like this. Students need to know that when they're doing their career research, if
Mm-hmm.
they're interns or just doing basic research, they need to know all of these little nuances, because that's how they figure out what the boundaries are. And I think when we started off talking, when we talked about the generations, there's a big difference, because this generation that's coming through now are pretty much saying, my boundary is, if my job is 9 to 5, I'm done at 5. Anything above that is comp time.
Yeah.
I am not on the clock during the weekends. I had a conversation in my previous job. I did a round of informational interviews with the deans and different people who are in positions that I wanted to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a VP. And I said, one of the things that scares me about being a VP is I like I'm not going to lie. And William, you know this. I like my evenings and I like my weekends.
It's like,
Don't
wait,
call
why
me.
are we working right now? Why are we working on the weekends? Why is this happening? I don't understand why this is happening.
Exactly. That's me. I like my weekends and I like my evenings.
Hmm.
And I said, I don't know if I can do this because I see emails coming through. Like the next day, I can see when someone sent me an email like 11 o'clock at night or 2 in the morning, that kind of craziness.
Hmm.
And I said, is that the expectation? And she said, Michelle, and she has a young son. She said, the president has my cell phone number if he needs me for something. But on the weekends, I don't entertain some of this other stuff because if he needs me, he can get a hold of me. But nothing is, the weekends are mine.
Okay. Hmm. Hmm.
I was like, okay, so that's how you set. I said, how do you set that boundary? Because, and she said, I had that I had that conversation, and that is a tough conversation to have. So I think going back to what you said, part of what we could do in the higher ed space
Hmm.
that we don't do is we don't talk about how to set those boundaries or how to define those boundaries in a professional way. How do you address, I'm not answering my emails at 10 o'clock at night.
Right. And one of the things that you have pointed out, and not just in this appearance, but in your previous appearance as well, is that there are a lot of things that the employers may not know. I know that some of the work that you did at Hack was working directly with employers and developing those relationships. Talk about some of the stuff that you learned in that process of outreach.
Well, I learned that outreach is tough. And it's tough because sometimes on Monday, you'll talk to recruiter A. By Tuesday, recruiter A is gone and it's on to recruiter B. And so you have to start the process all over again.
Hmm.
What
Hmm.
I have learned, the key to making the relationships work is being collaborative because
Okay.
employers want to help, they just don't know how.
Okay.
And they need to want to say, hey, we're running this program. Would you be willing to be on a panel? Or would you donate? Or would you? And 9 times out of 10, they're like, yeah, I'm there.
Right.
Because they want to have that face time with the student. So anything they can do to get that face time with a student, they're willing to do.
Gotcha. 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 Gotcha.
But it's
That's good.
also too trying to keep your finger on that pulse, like I said, because the recruiters can change
Hmm.
rapidly.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. And so it sounds like, again, for employers, I know we talk a lot about this for the students, but for the employers, it is also about developing the relationship with those critical stakeholders. Um, and as we get ready to wrap this up, I don't want us to leave on the note of you got to do all this stuff because you need students. Da, 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 da. Let's wrap this up talking about in your experience and some examples of how employers have benefited by bringing on students in ways that they may not have expected.
Well, I can go back and remember internships with students that have had internships. And I can say that most of my students that have had internships were hired by their companies. And
Okay.
the ones that weren't hired by the company came back and said, I learned so much. And sometimes the learning wasn't necessarily from they learned from the experience, but it wasn't a technical skill. It was
Mm-hmm.
learning about themselves, like
Mm-hmm.
being able to like self-monitor, like being able to get up and go to a job. I work with students who had never had jobs before. So the internship was their very first job, and it's their very
Okay.
first entryway into being accountable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they had to learn all of these things. And they came out of it like, this was a great experience because now I learned all of the stuff about me. I would
Yep.
never do that internship again.
Boom.
But which is fine. I'm like, and for me, as long as you learn something. And if you don't want to do the internship again, and sometimes it was because they didn't like the company, and
Hmm.
other times it was because um, they just didn't like the field. Like they decided
Gotcha.
that IT wasn't their thing, or biology wasn't their thing, or at least biology, the way that it was being performed at this particular company, just wasn't their thing. If
Gotcha.
I could give any, if I could give a message to employers, both large employers that have established internship programs and smaller employers that would like to establish an internship program, connect with your career services office that's nearest to you. And you can post your position for the smaller companies. With the bigger companies, they don't necessarily need that much of a push because a lot of
Mhm.
people know they have internship programs, so they get interns from all over the country applying for their internships. But for the smaller companies, you can post your internship at more than just one school. So you don't have to stick with just one institution.
Right.
At least I don't think anything's wrong with posting your internship in a couple of different schools because
Hmm.
you're going to
Hmm.
do different students, different skill sets, different majors. Why not have some variety in the applications that you have coming in? Sometimes the big mistake is companies will only stick with one school, and then they get upset because they don't have enough applications.
Makes sense. And that is a really great thing for like an action item for them to take so they can change the whole situation, because it is better that everybody participate and everybody knows what's going on as opposed to guessing.
Yes.
Oh wow, yo, I can't even believe how much time has passed. It always goes quickly with you. All right, Doc. What kind of messages do you want to leave the group with the audience members with?
Pay your interns. Think through your internship. Make sure you're coming out with, you actually have goals, objectives, and learning outcomes. It's really important that you have learning outcomes for the students so they know and you know. First of all, the student knows what they're supposed to be learning and what they're going to be evaluated on. And it's
Hmm.
okay to evaluate your interns. You can have a performance evaluation. Let them know what they've done well and what they need to work on, because how else will they know?
There you go.
How they're not going to know unless you say something. And you can't be
Absolutely.
afraid of hurting someone's feelings. I mean, they're your employee. You have to be honest with them and be transparent with them. Um, Sit down with your career services office, see if there are programs that you can be a part of, or the alumni association to see if there are programs that you can be a
Mhm.
part of. Anything, for example, we're partnering with a company, an organization for like a dress for success type
Oh,
thing,
okay.
where they're going to come in and talk to students about appropriate dress and what it looks like what's the difference between professional and business casual,
Hmm.
because some people don't know what that is. I'm still not 100% sure what it is. So, so, but that's what I would say. Think through your internship. Think through all of these experiences and things that you may want to have with a student, and really talk to your career services office about what's available, because they may be able to create some things for
Hmm.
you, tailor some things specifically for your company, um, and have you present to students and get in front of students, or even better, have you present in front of a class
Mm-hmm.
and
Hmm.
talk
Hmm.
about whatever you're going to talk about in front of a class of students. I can tell you from my experience that when students hear it from employers, it hits completely differently than when they hear it from me. Because they hear it from me, it's like hearing stuff from your mother. When you hear stuff from your mother, you go, oh, that's just mom saying X, Y, and Z.
Here we go. There
When
she
you hear
goes.
it from auntie,
Hmm.
you'll listen to auntie.
Okay.
And what we really want, my whole skin in the game is making sure our students have resources and that they are using those resources to their best benefit.
Sounds like a plan. I love it. I love it. I love it. How can people stay in contact with you or get in contact with you?
Yeah, you keep asking me that every show, and I never say anything. I'm always stuck as to what I
You're
need to say.
so
I'm
funny.
actually
Actually,
all
we're
over
gonna do this.
there.
We're gonna do this for you. If you all want to get in contact with the doc, we'll take care of your light work, doc. Just email us at info@grindinggang.com and we'll make sure that the information gets to the doc. Sound good, doc?
Sounds good. Or they can link up with me on LinkedIn.
Oh, that's right. We'll put your LinkedIn address or the LinkedIn link in the description so that they can get in touch with you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you so much, Doc. And I'm looking forward to talking to you later.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Yo, I told y'all I know dope people. Y'all don't even understand how dope the dopeness goes. But I'm trying to find some more dope people to get to know. So let me tell you a little bit about that. Greetings and salutations, all my friends out there in internet land. I am William Honolulu Jr., and I have the privilege of being the host of the Black USA News Morning Show. The Black USA News Morning Show is currently recruiting guests for an upcoming series on single parents and co-parenting. We find that there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of isolation in the narrative about single parents. And we want to make sure that we keep this platform available to tell the true story, our people's story. The topics that we will be covering range from health, wellness, the type of support, how important your social support system is, romance, and things of that nature. If you're interested in becoming a guest, you can check the link in the description. You can email us at info@grindinggang.com, or you can visit this link. Thank you so much and have an awesome day. Okie dokie, Smokey. So, any of those of you out there who are single parents or and have a co-parenting relationship, or um, however your family is structured, please don't hesitate to hit us up because we want to tell the true story about what's going on in our community. All right, this has been a really great show. I had an opportunity to talk to Dr. Michelle Talbert-Horsey about engaging small businesses and businesses in general with students and how to prepare for them. I'm looking forward to our next guest, our next topic, and either way, we'll be black then.